Hello and welcome to the iTnews podcast, sponsored by Jamf and the State of Security Report 2024. Stick around until the end to catch insights from Michael Covington, the Vice President for Portfolio Strategy at Jamf, on developing an effective endpoint security strategy for mobile devices, laptops and PCs within corporate networks. Our first guest this week is Marcelo Dantas, the CIO of Automic Group. Marcelo walks us through a recent mass migration of 180 companies onto Automic's share registry platform. He also talks in some detail about the organization's IT strategy and multi-pronged approach to information security.
Automic is a registry provider in Australia. We are a technology-powered business which is supported by a cloud-native platform that my team built. Our platform is an integrated platform that has listed registry fund registers, employee share plans, and investor analytics. And in addition to the registry business, we offer a range of professional services, which includes company secretarial finance, investor media relations, ESG, and employee share plan. And our mission is to make business easier for our clients. We've got 1,500 clients in total, including funds.
You've been the Chief Information Officer for 7 years, and you've even spent longer with the organization, predating your time as CIO. Can you talk a little bit about how the organization's use of technology has evolved over time?
Just to give context, I've been in the industry for over 22 years. And before Automic, I had the opportunity of working across utilities, airlines, insurance, and I've seen technology evolve quite a bit over the past 22 years. From a general architectural perspective, there's been lots of changes in how we build and define an architecture of an application. Applications back in the day used to be monolithic, and then we started shifting more into a service-oriented architecture with an MVC sort of standard, and then shifting more into microservices and serverless applications. And from an architectural perspective, there's been massive shift from on-premises to cloud infrastructure and lots of focus on information security. And what really changed since I joined Automic 9 years ago as the CTO and now I'm the CIO, before there was a lot of convincing to educate the customers why cloud is an efficient tool for us to host our architecture and our application. And over the years, the number of questions we get around why we are a cloud-native platform has been reduced. And there's been lots of changes into the services offered by AWS and other cloud providers. When we started 9 years ago, it was quite limited, all the tools and frameworks that AWS offered, and now we have a much wider range of ways that you can architect your applications, and the frameworks has just continue increases every month. And over the last year or so, the focus on artificial intelligence has also changed considerably how we define our application, what we think it's possible to do.
And are there specific challenges that you've seen emerge over time in the space that you operate in around registry services and registry services provision?
Yeah, the challenges overall is always one of the key challenges is information security. So the battle against the bad actors just keeps getting harder and harder. The tools they have at their disposal are becoming smarter. So it's always important to be at the forefront and trying to anticipate what the adversaries are trying to do. So the focus on information security will continue to be a very large challenge for the years to come. The additional, I wouldn't say so much a challenge, but a direction that everything is shifting is also moving more into a multi-cloud platform as well. Back in the day, everything was on-premise. You had full control of your architecture. And then there was a bit of education to educate the clients why we chose to be a cloud-native platform for all the resilience, security, availability, scalability that it provides. And now there's been a massive shift that having one single cloud provider is not sufficient. So there's always been conversations whether you should be a multi-cloud platform, which is an interesting challenge to solve over the next upcoming years as well.
Just to drill down specifically on those two areas. So just firstly on the information security side of things, are you able to just crystallize in the listener's mind what kind of cybersecurity challenges you have within your space? And I guess when you say that there's a lot of risk from threat actors, for example, what kind of valuable assets are you in control of that potentially look attractive to those kind of actors?
So as a registry provider, we host a very large volume of personally identifiable data. So we host millions of records of investors and tens of millions of transactions related to those investors. We face threats ranging from different angles. So we've got people attacking our infrastructure that we can see through the logs, different types of vulnerabilities, scanning brute force attacks. And we also get quite regularly the standard phishing campaigns and people trying to trick our employees into doing the wrong things. And the more that you advance, create new rules in the firewall, and you think you open the game, then you always get surprised that when you wake up in the morning, somebody tried something overnight, and then you just continue lifting up your defenses.
Just on the other side of things, talked about multi-cloud before. Are you able to just explain what your relation to multi-cloud is? Are you talking about, for example, your ability to provide additional resilience, for example, by being able to port aspects of registry service provision between clouds if something was to happen to your primary cloud, for example? Or are you talking about something completely different in terms of maybe customers wanting your platform to be provided on multiple different cloud platforms?
So to give you some context, our platform is incredibly resilient. So we leverage both Sydney and Melbourne regions within AWS in Australia, and we leverage all the three availability zones within each region. And all the services that we deploy, they deployed across all availability zones across all the regions. We've got our database replicated real time across different availability zones and also across different regions. And we've got all the standard controls around the network. And our application has been designed to be stateless, so it can scale up and down without having to worry what is in the hard drive of each of the components. So when you look through in isolation, the system is incredibly resilient and incredibly scalable. But there is always that question, if something were to happen to AWS, would that impact our ability to do business? The likelihood is incredibly small. Everything that we could do to make our application redundant, we have done. But it's always important to plan for the absolutely worst case scenario. If something does happen to AWS, you've got a full replica of your application running an alternative cloud provider with all the backup of the data in real time, just ready for you to make the switch. And this goes back into that education piece. So back 10 years ago or 12 years ago, when my cloud journey started, I had to convince my stakeholders that moving to the cloud was the right thing to do. And now we're shifting in a way that people are starting to expect that you're not only in the cloud, but you're actually in two clouds at the same time, if not more, which from a technical perspective is incredibly exciting, challenging to resolve. Like we love a bit of an architectural challenge to work through, but this is something that I think will become more mainstream over the years to come.
So I've talked a little bit about a couple of different areas that I presume would be part of your broader IT strategy, but it'd be useful to just understand what your current technology strategy looks like from a strategic pillars perspective and how that aligns with the broader needs of the Automic Group as an organization.
So the IT strategy starts with aligning with the company values. So two of the values that Automic has is customer success and team. So it's important that everything we continue building with our platform or any security control that we implement is with the best intentions to service our customers. And this is aligning with giving them better user experience, better insights, being more efficient, instant reporting, giving them a system that will be available when they need it, that will be reliable, that they can scale when there is a need to scale, just to name a few. And on the team value aspect is always continuously focusing on automation and operation efficiency. It's important for the team to be happy that they're efficient and they spend the time doing tasks that are valuable and it's exciting for them. So the more that we can reduce the manual work and giving them a more efficient way to do their day-to-day challenge. If you have a happy team, the team will make your customers happy. So it's a nice little cycle. And with the emerging of artificial intelligence, I think over the next couple of years, the level of operation efficiency that we'll be able to facilitate, it will be incredibly exciting. So it's definitely something to look for. The other pillar is cybersecurity and compliance. We touched on this before because it's a very important subject and people often take it for granted. Offering our customers a system that gives them the confidentiality, integrity, availability that they require is critical. The system needs to be up and running when they need it, and we need to make sure that if someone is not meant to have access, they won't have access. And I often speak to Andrew Wilson, who is Automic CEO. If 1 week goes by and I don't make a security improvement in our ecosystem, I start to get itchy. Even if it's a small firewall change, alerting every week, you need to consider what you can do to make your ecosystem more secure. And this goes way beyond just the system engineering and development. It goes around employee onboarding, offboarding, all the suppliers that you choose if they offer the same level of security that you expect them to have. It ranges into all the tools that we deploy in the ecosystem, endpoint protection, antivirus, CASB tools, and vulnerability programs, monitoring all the systems that you use to know if they got vulnerabilities, just to name a few. It is an ongoing battle, and with artificial intelligence, again, it might just get harder. So it might be the AI of the bad actors fighting against our AI to try to make everything secure. So very interesting to think how that would shape up. The other pillar, which is quite important, is innovation, continuous improvement. As technology moves in a very fast pace, over the last 22 years, I worked on probably maybe 35 different types of architecture. And since I started my journey at Automic, we already changed the architecture multiple times. And we're just about to undergo another massive change to completely shift into 100% infrastructure as a code, change the way that we deploy our application, to use Kubernetes clusters, changing the way that we scale the application based on messaging instead of just CPU processing. And it's always important to assume that you have to set you for the future. 10 years from now, when you look back, are you proud of the architecture that you have? And the only way to continuously say yes to that question is to continue innovating. When there is a new service, you have to be aware and find when is the appropriate time to incorporate that in your ecosystem. And obviously, for artificial intelligence, there's some proof of concepts and some items that we incorporate in that will be quite strategic to the ongoing company strategy as well. And the last one, which is probably one of the most important, is continue to shorten the gap between technology, business, and our customers. We do at Automic monthly releases, which are quite fast paced and is always working with all the stakeholders so that they've got visibility of what the changes are. When a change is coming out, that they're ready to start leveraging the change, that there is better communication and lots of excitement about what my team is developing. Those are probably the four more important pillars that I can pinpoint.
Just to drill into just one specifically, which caught my attention, which was on operational efficiency. Just firstly, just to preface that, what's the size of the team within the technology operations?
In the technology team, we've got around 45 employees, which ranges from engineers, UX designers, cybersecurity analysts, systems administrators, product managers, and business analysts, just to name a few. I probably missed a couple, but it's a quite diverse team. In Automic itself, we've got around 280 employees across Sydney, Melbourne, and Perth.
So, just on operational efficiency, you mentioned that a real drive is to get people doing more valuable work, removing some of the manual work. You mentioned AI within that same breath. And I guess in the context of what's going on within the broader industry, there's a lot of attention being focused on some of the co-pilots. And particularly, I can probably sense that something like a GitHub co-pilot, for example, might be interesting for you within your context. Can you talk just briefly about what as AI tools like potentially might help you? It may not be AI, it may be process automation as well or something similar, but some of these tools that might help you to achieve the operational efficiency pillar.
So we're looking through those tools from many different angles. So I'll try to give you a taste of a few different varieties. From an engineering perspective, we've always used certain level of artificial intelligence to scan our code for vulnerabilities. So we adopt, for as long as I can remember, a tool called SonarQube, which scans your code and finds anti-patterns, potential security vulnerabilities, and help the team in real time identifying opportunities for improving that before it goes to production. But that defense now became a bit more proactive. So you can leverage tools such as I mentioned, GitHub Copilot or ChatGPT, or the one that we've been experimenting with AWS Code Whisperer, that you basically can get some help to get templates of code. For example, if you want to get a code that is going to open up a file, instead of searching on the internet and finding some from Stack Overflow, you can just give me an example for code that opens up a file in Java, and then that gives you a template. So that certainly makes things more efficient. I don't think that is replacing us as engineers. I think that's making us engineers more efficient. So anything that would give you that advantage to hit the ground running, it would be beneficial. So it's always important to be aware where you paste your code. You probably wouldn't and shouldn't paste your production code into the public ChatGPT, but tools that are private that we've got control and it's being sanctioned by Automic, it's been quite positive. And on the general sense, we've been looking from an organizational perspective, how we can also use AI to enable more efficiency across the business. So we've been trialing within certain departments like marketing, ChatGPT, to help generating content. And again, that's not the tool doing the job for the human. It's still a human giving the tool the prompts and indication what that content will look like. It's just doing some of the heavy lifting. I like to make a parallel that's almost like having an EA. It's just you giving the tool the points and it helps you putting that together. So when I write an email to the company with the technology updates, which I write every month, It used to take me probably 2.5 hours to stitch it all together to get to the level that I was happy to share to a company-wide email. And now leveraging the AI tools, they picked all the points and I can get that email done in 40 minutes. And it's still me, it's still my personality, it's still my way of communicating. It's just making that a lot more efficient. And we've also been looking to the general population of Automic to trial Microsoft Copilot, which is fully embedded into the Office tools. Again, similar content to help summarizing mails or help summarizing Teams conversations, which again is always expecting to give some time back to our team at the end of the day, which I particularly find quite exciting.
Look, those are all good use cases. They're all, I think, use cases across the board, especially around content generation. So that makes perfect sense. If we can switch tack slightly, I understand that you've recently completed one of the largest ever registry services transitions in Australia, and this is off the back of Automic's acquisition of Advanced Registry. Do you want to talk us through a little bit about what that transition looked like?
So just taking a step back to give some context what a transition is. So in our industry, any ASX-listed company or any fund can choose to switch registry providers. And when that happens, the incumbent will export all the data of that customer in a format of their choosing and will share with us via secure channel. Again, something that we agree individually with each vendor what a secure channel is. And to bring that client into our ecosystem, we have to reconcile all the data. So our system has been designed to have 100% data integrity. If we get data that doesn't reconcile, our system is going to reject it every time that we transition. And there are inconsistencies with the data that has to be corrected before we can queue that should be ingested by our system. And to give you an example, it could be capital reconstructions that could have gone wrong. Instead of correcting the whole transactions, they just correct the holding balance. So whenever we get some of those, we spent hours trying to correct it, figure out what should have happened, correcting the data, cleaning, and then importing to the system. And this is a process that we're very familiar. We do that almost every weekend for as long as I can remember over the past 9 years. But when you do that in the scale of advanced, we're effectively doing that 181 times into a single day, which is quite a big piece of work. And it comes with a lot of challenges. One is data integrity. So all those 181 clients, we need to ensure that the data is in the level of quality that our system is going to accept. Then it comes also with the challenge of how long it will take to clean the data, import into the system, and to test it. So there are two components to make all that work happen. One is the technology side that we are going to touch, and the other one is the planning and the product management. So we've done probably 5 or 6 times the whole process end to end to get to a level that we were comfortable to do it. And I like saying that when you do a project like this, it's almost like you playing tennis against yourself because you've got everything that you need to be able to predict the output of that game. So it's up to you to plan and just execute it. So starting with the help from operations, we needed all those 181 clients to exist in our systems and to decide from all the data that we receive from Advanced what is relevant for us to import. There are certain classes that are created just for supporting capital market events, and they don't necessarily need to be imported. But there are classes like options in your generically pays that they are super critical. So there was a lot of decisions that we worked with the Automic operations to decide what goes and what stays. So the second aspect is getting all the data under control. So for all the 181 clients, we had to pretty much try to reconcile, found all the errors, automated the correction of those errors, share that with our technology team to see who else is encountering the same errors. And we had to correct probably tens of thousands of inconsistencies in the data before we could import it in the system. So it was a pretty large effort. So every time that you encounter a new scenario, there is a bit of analysis. So it's almost like playing a game. You have to understand what should have happened and why it happened the way that it happened so that you can correct it accurately. So once you do that for all the clients, then we load all of that in a test system. And this is our first checkpoint. And at that point, the Automic operations will test all the data, compare with the reports provided by Advanced to make sure that the data aligns with what they expect to see. So once you do that the first time, then you get certain confidence. Okay, we can do this. The data now is under control. The team signed off. So we are heading the right track. The next hurdle that you have to go through now is how long does the whole process take? Because the ambition is to get it done in a single weekend. So the next step is work out how long does it take now from the ground up with all the automation that we put in place to reconcile all the data and queue that should be imported by the system. So we established that 6 of my engineers would take about 1 hour to get all the data under control, and it would take another 30 minutes to queue them up to the system if we had the right number of agents. So the next question would be how much processing power you need to add to your infrastructure so that you can load that within acceptable time. Because again, if it takes 72 hours to load, that makes the work on the weekends not achievable. So you have to bring that down according to hours and not days. And as you start playing with the capacity, there are multiple variables. It could be the number of messages that you pull out of the queue, or it could be the number of components processing the messages of the queue. So you find the throughput which you're comfortable with. So this appears to get us where we want to be. And then you have to monitor how the resources are used. You don't want the CPU of your database to go to 100% while you're doing the process. Otherwise, you may bring your system to a halt. So after you work out your sweet spot, then you have to do one more test. Okay, I identified that this is what I need and this is how long I believe it's going to take. So you do a full end-to-end again and say, okay, this actually took 5 hours as I expected. So everything is starting to line up. So the next piece of the puzzle now is the human aspect. So if I give everyone at 8 o'clock in the morning the data of 181 customers, how long it would take for all those clients to be tested and signed off so that we can load it again in production. So this was helping with the planning of how many people we needed on the day to support the testing. So after you've got all of that in place, you've got a pretty good chance of succeed, but that's still not enough in my opinion. So you have to be certain. So we've done all of that one more time. We've got the data from Advanced at the time they would give us the data, which was around midnight. Then my team worked overnight to clean up the data. We loaded everything, made sure that it was all ready by 7 in the morning. And then we've got the operations team to do all the testing to make sure that it was achievable within a day. So once we walked in this Saturday, we were pretty comfortable that we knew how long it was going to take. We knew that the data was under control, and we knew that we had enough people to make the testing successful. So we started the process around midnight, and by 5 o'clock in the afternoon, everything was signed off. So we had over tens of millions of transactions imported, more than 1.5 million investor data in our system. And it was a quite successful transition. There was a lot of planning, a lot of testing, a lot of preparation, but it was pretty good outcome in the end.
And the 181 clients that you're mentioning there, just to clarify, these are listed companies within Australia.
That's correct. And out of those 181 clients, they had approximately 3 million holders, where 1.5 they were active holders, and we're talking about tens of millions of transactions.
And just to drive home that point, and just to talk a little bit to the methodical planning that went into this, can you explain, I guess, the criticality of a migration such as this? Because I'm assuming, you have to do this over the weekend because you can't do this at any time when there is trading activity. So there would also be potentially consequences for listed organizations who use these platforms if the underlying software, for example, isn't available during trading hours.
Yes, that's a very good question. Just taking a step back, one very critical aspect in being a registry provider is that we need to hold an accurate representation of who the holders of the company is. And for that to happen, we need to be 100% in sync with the ASX. So the ASX work through all the traders during the day, and then they send us all the messaging overnight we have to process to keep the two registries in sync. So one critical aspect is for a transition to be successful before the morning activity opens at 6 a.m. on a Monday. You need to have the information of all the holders in the registry accurate with the right balance. Once we start receiving messages, we can respond with instructions, making the right decision whether a transaction is authorized or rejected. The connectivity doesn't happen by default, which is an important piece of the puzzle. So when you've got a class which is listed, when we transition a customer to us, we have to connect that security class with the ASX. So we send a message saying, please keep me updated in all the transactions. So when we did that for this large number of customers, we had to go through all the listed classes and make sure that every single class was connected before 6 a.m. in the morning so that we start receiving the messaging and receiving the reports, check the two registers in sync. And the risk of, or the consequences of not doing that correctly is that you start drifting and the two registries will become out of sync, and then we would be in breach of the listing rules, and it would be very problematic to our customers. So it was a lot of preparation, cross-checking, triple checking to make sure that every single class was accounted for and everything was connected before early in the morning.
Plus, it was having the systems that you've had in place for a number of years to do this, and also having the experience of working with large data sets and cleansing large data sets and bringing them into line with the requirements for your system.
That's correct, yes. And this goes back into one of the benefits of leveraging a cloud platform, that you scale processing power. It's something that can be done dynamically. So we've got rules in place that our system automatically reacts if there is an increase of load to bring more capacity. And there is a lot of capacity planning that we do as we onboard new customers to ensure that the processes that we have are still operating within acceptable time frames. Scaling both horizontally and vertically as well, but we largely do more horizontal scaling to ensure that we've got enough processing power to cope with the load. And this is interesting to note. We've been watching pretty closely because overnight we receive messages from the ASX with all the transactions that took place during the day for all of our customers. So we've been watching to see how our system react to the increased load as the result of the advanced transition. But the scalability that we put in place is still handling the process in an acceptable time frame, which is good to see. But being in the cloud and being able to scale without having to send someone to a server room and hooking up a new server has been quite positive.
So just very briefly, last final question we ask everyone is what excites you about the next 12 months?
That's a very good question. Something that I'm constantly thinking about. Definitely artificial intelligence, as we touched a few times. The barrier of entry to leverage artificial intelligence is much lower than it was a few years ago. And the power that you can do with generative AI to bring value to the customers or to bring value internally is insanely exciting. What I really think that will happen over time, with a big shift in the user experience, is personally, I think that in a few years, there will be no more concepts of apps. So when you interface with a system or with your phone, you wouldn't have to navigate to a specific app, to a specific menu to get the work done. You would pretty much interface, speaking like you speak to a human. Hey, iPhone, please transfer 100,000 from my bank account to someone else's bank account, or I would like to send an email. And then you basically would be interfaced with voice commands rather than having to remember where an application is, what the application is for. And it will make things a lot more interactive and a lot more productive. And another area which excites and frightens me at the same time is the impact on information security. So the tool is very powerful to us, but it's very powerful to our adversaries as well. So they would be using those tools for evil, and we'll have to use those tools to help defending our customers and defending ourselves. And also what I touched, the multi-cloud excites me as well. It's a very interesting architectural problem to solve, and I would love to get that off the blueprint over the next years or so.
Endpoint security has become a complex science that requires a clear plan based on mitigating risks. Researchers across the world suggesting at least 2/3 of all cyber attacks are initiated through compromised endpoints. It is critical to develop a strategy that protects each different type of endpoint with appropriate controls. The controls that are right for mobile devices are not the same as those for PCs used inside the corporate networks. Michael Covington, the Vice President for Portfolio Strategy at Jamf, says there are 3 critical elements to consider when formulating your endpoint strategy.
The 3 key elements of an endpoint security strategy are really going to be, first, understanding your core requirements in the threat landscape. Second, making sure that you have very clear understanding of the device types and platforms that you're going to be protecting. And third, all of the operational aspects that need to sit adjacent to the solution when you go to deploy. We want to think about beyond the requirements are the types of devices that we're protecting foundationally. A mobile device like an iPhone is going to have a very different set of needs than a device like a MacBook that sits at a desk in the company campus. We also need to be thinking about company-owned devices as well as personally owned devices, and making sure that your strategy at least accounts for whether or not you're going to be supporting that mix of device type within the organization. We want to make sure that we're considering the endpoint security components alongside device management or deployment tools. We want to make sure that we're coexisting with other software or agents and thinking through the test plan as part of our strategy formulation.
Having a great strategy is not the same as delivering on its promise. When reality bites, organizations need to think more broadly about the risks they are trying to mitigate.
The biggest problem we see as organizations transition from strategy development to strategy execution is that delivery is where you encounter the real world. And sometimes the focus in strategy formulation is around the spec sheet or the feature list. We oftentimes forget about the deployment of the technology, and so therefore we're underplanned when it comes to thinking about how we get that solution out to a device, activated and maintained over the life cycle of that device and of the user base that we're actually trying to protect. We also realize that a lot of organizations don't consider all of the connective tissues that really are involved in a project when they're in planning mode. We see a lot of organizations struggle with usability. They plan the absolute best solution from a feature perspective, but they don't always think about both the impact on their end users nor the impact on their operational staff to oversee that solution and deployment.
The days of homogenized end-user environments where everyone used the same operating platforms and devices for everything are behind us. Securing such a diverse environment requires a risk-based approach that isn't based on a one-size-fits-all deployment model.
Diversity is really central to an endpoint strategy in general. We find that so many organizations are trying to support more and more device types, and that's great. But this is also where it's really important that we focus on the requirements. Be realistic when it comes to choosing your endpoint security capabilities. It's important that we stack rank the risks that you're most concerned about and make sure that you're taking those into account as you're considering the solutions that you are going to acquire. Your organization is likely to support many different use cases for device deployments. And as a result, you're going to have different risks that you're going to encounter on those devices. For example, mobile devices that operate very often outside of your corporate campus are going to encounter a different set of risks than those that are isolated within the walls of your organization and take on a different form factor like a laptop or a desktop. We want to make sure that diversity isn't a distraction, that we're not trying to get everything into one tool, but instead we can actually focus on efficacy as one of the core requirements that we're actually able to deliver through the solution. And let's not forget, security is all about defense in depth. Make sure that you're there to support your end user productivity at the end of the day. Endpoint security should be about enabling workers to operate risk-free, not about blocking them when they encounter something bad.
Making a start on an endpoint security strategy can seem daunting, but Michael says there are some steps to take before diving straight into buying or applying solution.
The best place to start when formulating your endpoint security strategy is really to read up on the current state of the threat landscape. Understanding the types of risks that your workers are going to encounter, both those that are coming from outside attackers, as well as those that might just come from workers making mistakes while they go about their daily activities. For so long now, we've looked at device management, endpoint security, remote access as different areas that require different strategies. We're now operating in a more integrated type of world where each one of those capability sets feeds the other. And if you actually plan your strategies accordingly, you can get a real benefit by bringing these tools together, or at least considering the adjacent tools when you're formulating your strategies in these different areas.
Endpoint security is a critical element of every security strategy. With endpoints under almost constant attack, the right tools are chosen by taking a risk-based approach that does not compromise the user experience. Organizations must focus on tools that apply appropriate controls to mitigate the risk of attack.
That's the episode for this fortnight. Stay tuned for the next episode. And for all the latest headlines and happenings in Australian technology news, head over to itnews.com.au.